Hello, my name's Ava Reynolds. Last month, my father threw a cup of hot coffee at my chest because I said no. No, I wouldn't co-sign a car loan for my brother-in-law. But that wasn't the worst part. The worst part was realizing it wasn't just coffee. It was years of control, guilt, and silence finally boiling over. They called me unstable. They posted a video of me crying in a bathroom. They erased me from our family chat, from our home, from my own past. But what happens when the quiet daughter stops being quiet? Do they expect her to fold or to finally take the house back one signature at a time? I was just finishing my lunch break when my phone buzzed with a message from my sister Lila. It read, "Hey, Caleb's trying to get approved for a car loan, but he needs a co-signer. Can you help us out? It's urgent." I stared at the screen. My salad wilted a little more in its plastic bowl as I read that line again. Not can you help, but can you help us? Like it was already assumed. That was the problem. Everything with them was assumed. My job, my money, my time, my silence. I was the youngest, the fixer, the family fallback plan. It wasn't always like this. I remember being proud to help when Lila was pregnant the first time and Caleb had just lost his job. But then the second time it happened, and then a third. At some point, just this once became, of course, Ava will. I locked my phone without answering. Back at my desk, I kept glancing at it like it might burst into flames. For once, I wanted to say no without guilt setting up camp in my stomach. But I knew how this worked. The moment I refused, the guilt parade would arrive, led by Dad, followed by Lila's tears. Then Mom with her passive sighs. That night, Lila messaged again. Dinner at Dad's. Be there by 7. We'll talk then. The word talk felt like code. Code for ambush. So I went. Because despite knowing better, I still hoped maybe, just maybe, someone would surprise me. Their house hadn't changed. Same porch light flickering. Same air that smelled like furniture polish and old casserole. Lila greeted me with a high-pitched, too sweet, "Hey, sis," while Caleb gave a sheepish wave. He was wearing a brand new hoodie and sneakers. Odd for someone apparently desperate for a car loan. Dinner started like it always did. Dad grumbled about the news. Mom passed around dry roast beef. Lila smiled too much. Then, just as I was halfway through buttering a roll, Dad cleared his throat. "So," he said, resting his elbows heavily on the table. "Heard you got a bonus last quarter. Is that true?" I nodded, already tasting the direction this was headed. "That's great," he said. "You're in a good spot now. Which brings me to something. Caleb's working on getting a car. He needs a co-signer. Just temporary." I put my knife down. Lila leaned in, voice all velvet. "It would really help, Ava. Just until he builds his credit. You're the only one we trust with this." "You mean the only one with a decent credit score?" I said, keeping my tone level. Silence fell for a beat too long. Dad looked over his glasses at me. "We raised you better than this. Don't forget who paid for your college." "I haven't forgotten," I replied, meeting his gaze. "But that was your choice, not a contract." His face twitched. "We gave you everything, Ava. Clothes, food, a roof over your head, and now you can't help your own family?" "I've helped," I said, firmer. "Plenty of times. I just can't keep saying yes to everything." "You've changed," Lila muttered, shaking her head like I was disappointing her spiritually. "No," I said, standing. "I'm just tired." Dad's voice cut like a slap. "Don't forget who gave you everything." I turned toward Lila. "It's just a signature, right?" She shrugged as if none of this mattered. "You're making it bigger than it is." "I'm not signing anything," I said quietly, gathering my coat. I didn't slam the door when I left. I didn't cry in the car. I just drove slowly, hands steady on the wheel, heart louder than the engine. And I didn't know it then, but that would be the last time I walked out of that house quietly. I didn't sleep much that night. My body ached in ways I couldn't name, but the weight behind my ribs wasn't physical. It was the kind that pressed down from the inside, made your shoulders tense even when lying flat. When the sun slipped through the blinds the next morning, I was already dressed. Jeans, sweatshirt, no makeup, just clean and clear enough to say, I'm not here to fight, but I'm not here to bend either. At 7:43 a.m., Lila texted, "Dad wants to talk. Just make it right." No greeting, no context. As if everything that happened at dinner was simply a moment I should sweep under the rug for the sake of family. I got in my car anyway, not because I owed them anything, but because something inside me still hoped there was room for repair. The house looked the same, but colder somehow. The porch light was still on despite the morning sun, flickering like it didn't know when to quit. I parked in the driveway, paused for a long moment, then stepped out. Lila answered the door. Her face was tired, lips tight. "He's in the living room," she murmured, not meeting my eyes. Caleb wasn't there. His absence didn't need explanation. This wasn't about him anymore. Dad sat in his recliner, arms crossed like a judge, waiting to hear my confession. The TV was muted, casting silent flickers across the room. He didn't say hello. "So," he began, voice clipped. "You've had time to think." I sat on the edge of the couch, legs crossed at the ankles. "Yes, and I still won't sign." His face darkened. "You're being selfish." "No, I'm being responsible." He stood. "You've always thought you were better than this family. Ever since you moved out." "That's not true," I cut in. "I bailed you out more times than I can count. I just won't do it blindly anymore." He went quiet, jaw working. Then, without warning, he grabbed the coffee cup from the side table, full, still steaming, and hurled it. It hit my chest with a splash and a crack. The mug shattered against the floor. I gasped, more from the shock than the burn. For a second, no one moved. The heat seeped through my sweatshirt, stinging my skin. The silence afterward was louder than the shatter. I looked down, wet fabric clinging to my chest. Then I looked up. Lila stood at the hallway, hands pressed over her mouth, but she didn't rush to help. She didn't speak. She just watched. I turned without a word and walked to the bathroom, dripping across the floor. I closed the door gently. My hand shook as I peeled off the sweatshirt, revealing red skin already blotching. I didn't cry. I didn't scream. I grabbed a clean towel from the rack, ran cold water, pressed it to my chest. Outside the door, I heard Lila on the phone. Her voice was low but clear. She provoked him. She just kept pushing. I told her to drop it. I didn't know who she was talking to. Didn't care. The towel was damp now. I sat on the closed toilet lid, breathing slow. This was it. Not the pain, not the coffee, but the final confirmation. They didn't care what happened to me, just how they could explain it away. There was a mirror above the sink. I looked at myself. Red-faced, damp hair, eyes rimmed with unshed tears. But I wasn't broken. I wasn't small. I was done. A soft knock. Lila's voice muffled. "He did worse to me once. You'll get over it." I didn't answer. She waited. Then her footsteps faded. I sat there a few more minutes before standing up, wrapping the towel tighter. I put on my coat over the wet shirt, ignoring the sting. Walked back out to the front door. No one tried to stop me. My keys were still on the hallway table. I picked them up. Not a word, not a glance back. As I stepped outside into the brisk air, one truth echoed louder than anything else in my mind. They would never protect me. Not now, not ever. And if I wanted safety, real safety, I'd have to create it for myself. By the time I pulled into my parking spot that evening, the ache in my chest had shifted. It wasn't just the sting of the burn anymore. It was something colder, deeper, like a bruise that had taken root in my ribs. I moved slowly up the stairs, still wearing the damp sweatshirt under my coat, still feeling the weight of Lila's voice behind the bathroom door. "He did worse to me once. You'll get over it." I hadn't responded then because there was nothing to say to someone who saw pain as part of the family tradition. I closed the apartment door behind me and leaned back against it for a moment. No one here to greet me. No voices, no guilt, just the soft hum of my fridge and the ticking wall clock. I set down my keys, peeled off the coat, and finally carefully pulled the sweatshirt over my head. The fabric clung for a second before letting go. I winced. The skin was red, blistered in one place. I grabbed the first aid kit from under the sink, sat on the edge of the tub, and applied a cold pack. The moment the chill touched my skin, memory rushed in. I was 12 when I fell off the jungle gym at school. Split my chin. Blood everywhere. The school nurse called Dad, and he took me to the ER, grumbling the whole way. At the front desk, they asked for the insurance information. I remember the nurse's voice, gentle. "She's not showing up on the plan, sir." "What do you mean?" he snapped. "It looks like she was removed. You'll need to pay out of pocket." He turned to me like it was somehow my fault. "I told your mother we were cutting extras." Guess she forgot. Extras. That was the word he used. Like I was an additional service on a cable plan. I hadn't thought about that day in years. But the way my chest throbbed now, it brought it all back. That wasn't just the day I needed stitches. That was the day I realized I was optional. I wrapped the burn, changed into something clean, and wandered through my apartment. I paused at the bookshelf, neatly stacked. My books, my photos, all still here, safe. Then I remembered the last time I went back to my childhood bedroom. It was 6 months ago. Lila had invited me to drop off a baby gift. "Come inside, say hi to Dad," she said. So I did. On impulse, I'd gone upstairs, curious. My old room was barely recognizable. The walls were beige now. My trophies were gone. The bookshelf replaced with a plastic storage rack stacked with bins labeled holiday decor and miscellaneous. In the center of the wall, where my high school diploma once hung, was a large canvas of Lila and Caleb's wedding. Gold trim, fake smiles. I had stood in that doorway and felt something close up in my throat. I didn't cry. I didn't say a word. I just turned, walked out, and never spoke of it again. Tonight, though, I felt everything. I poured a glass of water, sat at my dining table, and reached for the file box beneath it, the one where I kept my financial records. Tucked behind my tax documents was a folder labeled LLC, Sunridge Property. I opened it slowly. Inside, purchase documents, closing statements, property tax records. The house they lived in, the house I grew up in, was mine. 2 years ago, when the house went into pre-foreclosure, I made a deal with a real estate investor I'd worked with through freelance projects. I didn't tell anyone. Bought it through a limited liability company. Kept the rental agreement as is. Let them stay. Didn't raise the rent. It wasn't out of charity. It was strategy. I wanted a safety net, a way to invest. But tonight, for the first time, it felt like something else. It felt like leverage. I pulled out the deed, set it on the table, and traced my name. Ava Elaine Reynolds, managing member. For years, they told me what I owed them. Every dollar, every favor, every ounce of respect. But here it was in black and white. What they owed me. A roof they lived under, a contract they didn't read, a daughter they never expected would outgrow their control. I didn't feel angry. Not anymore. What I felt was focus, not vengeance, not cruelty, precision. I stacked the papers back into the folder, sealed it tight, and placed it back in the box. Then I picked up my phone, opened a blank notes page, and typed 3 words. 30 days notice. The streets were still damp from an early morning drizzle when I pulled out of my parking lot. I hadn't touched the coffee pot. I wasn't interested in caffeine. I needed clarity. And clarity doesn't come in cups. It comes with decisions. By 8:05 a.m., I was in the lot of the county courthouse. The building stood gray and indifferent. The kind of structure built more for permanence than beauty. I walked in with a folder under my arm, one I hadn't opened again since the night before. But I knew exactly what was inside. The deed, my name, my leverage. The woman at the civil clerk window looked up as I approached. "Help you?" I nodded. "I'm filing a lease violation through my LLC. I have documentation. The tenants have been in breach for over 3 months." She barely blinked. "Let's see the papers." I slid them over. She scanned them quickly, checking names, dates, property at Sunridge Lane. "Yes," I said. "They've ignored multiple notices." That part was technically true, just not from me. The property manager I'd worked with on paper had sent standard late notices as protocol. I'd never followed up before. I hadn't needed to, but that morning I gave the go-ahead to proceed. "Filing fee is $190. You can pay card or check," the woman said. I handed her my card, signing the screen without hesitation. As I stepped back into the parking lot, the clouds had broken. Sunlight cut through in streaks across the wet pavement. I took a breath that didn't tremble. Not this time. By 9:30, I was at the property management office, sitting across from Doug, the man I'd hired 2 years ago. He was balding, soft-spoken. Always wore a polo shirt no matter the season. "I didn't know you wanted to proceed," he said, flipping through the lease folder. "We've kept them on month-to-month since last renewal." "Time's up," I replied. "You can initiate the formal notice today. 30 days, no extensions." Doug looked at me a moment longer. "This will create some noise. You ready for that?" I didn't blink. "They threw boiling coffee at me, Doug. I'm done waiting for quiet." He nodded. "No more questions asked." On the drive home, I stayed off the highway. I took the long way past the park where Dad used to take me and Lila when we were little. I remember one afternoon, I must have been 9. He promised we'd get ice cream after feeding the ducks, but we never did. He'd forgotten by the time we got in the car. Lila didn't say anything. I didn't either. That kind of forgetting runs deep in my family. I pulled over 2 blocks from the house and wrote something on a scrap of paper, folded it carefully, slipped it into my glove box. It wasn't meant for anyone else to read, just something I needed to say aloud, even if only in ink. Respect is not a gift. It's a lease. It expires. I didn't drive up to the house. I passed it slowly, just once. Curtains were drawn. Dad's truck in the drive. No sign of Lila. No reason to stop. I wasn't there to make a scene. I was done giving them an audience. Back home, I microwaved a cup of tea and stood by the window. The envelope from the courthouse sat on the table. I didn't touch it. I didn't need to look again. The gears were turning. Around noon, my phone buzzed. It was a picture. Lila, holding up a check, smiling with that same performative glow she'd always worn when trying to appear in control. The caption read, "Still winning." No context, no mention of what it was for, but the message was clear. She wanted me to see her as untouched, as superior, as unfazed. I didn't answer. I didn't delete it either. I simply set the phone down and let a slow smile pull at the corners of my mouth. Not mockery, not revenge, just clarity. Tomorrow, she'd understand that smiles don't always mean surrender. I woke to the soft buzz of my phone on the nightstand. Monday morning, I didn't rush to check it. Instead, I folded laundry on the couch, let the kettle boil, answered 2 work emails. It wasn't until I poured my tea that I finally opened the notification. It was a Facebook tag. Lila had posted a picture. I stared at it for a long moment, spoon frozen in midair over my cup. There I was, kneeling next to a folding table, handing out brown paper bags to a line of community members at the food drive I'd volunteered for last weekend. I remembered the moment clearly. I'd asked Lila to take the photo. She said, "Sure," with a little smirk and snapped it without a word. Now, it was posted on her account with the caption, "Proud of my little weekend of service, it's so important to give back." And then came the comments, "You're such a role model, Lila. Wish more people were like you. This city needs more hearts like yours." I set my cup down without drinking. The heat from the mug no longer warmed my hands. Scrolling down, I saw dozens of likes, claps, hearts. Lila had even added a location tag, downtown Cincinnati, just to make it look authentic. Not a single mention of me, not a thank you, not even a tag. I took a breath, then another. My hands hovered over the keyboard. I typed, "Interesting that I was the one actually handing out those meals." Deleted it. Typed again, "Glad you enjoyed taking credit for my weekend." Deleted that, too. After a few more rounds of composing and erasing, I stopped. Instead, I opened a private message window and typed, "You used me for credit. You used me for silence. You won't use me for praise." I didn't expect a thoughtful response. And I didn't get one. Lila replied 2 minutes later, "Chill. It's just a photo. You're overreacting again." Again. That word hit me harder than it should have. As if reacting to theft of time, of identity, of voice was something shameful. As if my response to being steamrolled had always been the real problem. I didn't reply. I took a screenshot of the message and saved it to a folder I had quietly started compiling on my desktop, documented patterns. Later that afternoon, I called my attorney, Rachel. "We're ready to initiate the final step," I told her. "No extensions?" she asked, already knowing the answer. "None. I want everything filed and served by Wednesday." "Let's skip the courtesy call." "You're sure?" "Very." After we hung up, I went to the hallway closet and retrieved the small vision board I'd started at the beginning of the year. It was a modest corkboard with a few notes, a list of goals, and a photo of a beach house I'd been working toward. I added something new, a printed copy of Lila's Facebook post. I pinned it right next to a copy of the eviction notice template. A few hours passed quietly. I finished a work report, prepped dinner, watered my plants. I didn't mention the post to anyone. I didn't call Lila. I let the digital world carry her performance while I moved like a woman preparing to reclaim her name. Just after 6 p.m., my phone buzzed again. It was another post. This time a story, a blurry mirror selfie of Lila. One hand holding her phone, the other placed gently over her stomach. No caption, just a sticker that read, "Family is everything. We protect our own." Implied pregnancy, or maybe just drama. I stared at it for a long time. Then I opened the eviction notice file, adjusted the date, filled in the recipient's full name. I hit print. As the paper fed through the machine, I stood still in the middle of my apartment, arms crossed. They had always preached about loyalty. But in this family, loyalty only ever flowed one way. Tuesday started early. I barely slept, but I didn't feel tired. The kind of focus I woke with didn't come from rest. It came from finality. I'd already made the copies, double-checked the packet, and sealed the envelope the night before. By 8 a.m., the legal courier was outside my apartment. He was young, polite, and didn't ask questions. I handed him the envelope and said, "Deliver it directly to Henry Reynolds. No one else." He nodded, tucked it into his bag, and left with a quiet, "Have a good day." It was done. By 9:15, I'd settled into work emails and small calls. I didn't check social media. Didn't text Lila. I didn't need to. They'd know soon enough. At 4:02 p.m., my phone buzzed again. "Voicemail, Henry." I tapped play and held the phone away from my ear as his voice barked through. "You ungrateful brat. We took you in when no one else would. You lived under our roof for how long? And this is how you thank us." you think you're better than us? You're just some little girl with a job and a big ego. That house isn't yours. It's ours. Always will be. I stopped the message before it ended. I didn't need to hear the rest. That voicemail wasn't for me. It was for him. His last chance to prove I still cared about his approval. I didn't. I blocked the number and took a deep breath. The sun had started shifting in the sky, casting long streaks across the window. My apartment felt still, not quiet. Still, like it was holding its breath with me. I was halfway through a document review when my cousin Hannah sent me a text. "Hey, I think you should see this." It was a link. I clicked it. A video. 38 seconds. The screen loaded, and there I was, sitting in a restroom stall years ago at Lila's baby shower. You could hear faint music in the background. Someone had filmed me through the crack of the door. I was crying, hands covering my face, shoulders shaking. You couldn't hear my voice, but my grief was obvious. The caption read, "Toxic people always make it about them. Drama queen." It was posted by a friend of Lila's, but anyone with eyes could see where it came from. The video had already been shared to the family group chat. Hannah's screenshot confirmed that people were reacting with the usual eye roll emojis, comments like, "She always finds a way to ruin everything." And of course, she made it about herself. I stared at the screen for a while. Then I closed it, not out of defeat, out of clarity. They wanted to humiliate me publicly because they had lost control privately. Just before dinner, my phone lit up again. "Nora." The message was simple, "I saw the video. That was awful. I know that's not what happened." I stared at it for a second, then typed back, "Thank you, but I'm okay." Really? I wasn't sure if that was entirely true, but I needed it to be. After cleaning up the kitchen, I opened my laptop and emailed Rachel, my attorney. Subject line, "Accelerate timeline." I wrote, "No more courtesy delays. Let's move up the formal notice service. If needed, I'll also pursue a restraining order. There's now digital harassment." Rachel replied within 10 minutes, "Understood. I'll update the clerk and serve them directly by end of day tomorrow." I closed the laptop, walked to the hallway, and opened the drawer where I kept my markers and tape. I took the eviction notice I'd printed the day before and pinned it next to the screenshot of Lila's Facebook post. Then I took out my phone. I opened Instagram, took a screenshot of the notice, just the bottom where my initials were printed in clean black ink. I posted it to my story with no caption, no hashtags, no comments, just my signature. If anyone wanted to understand the why, they could dig for themselves because some stories don't need explanations, just signatures. By Wednesday morning, the silence was deceptive. No calls, no texts, not even a passive-aggressive meme. I sipped my tea and watched the rain smear across the window like a watercolor gone rogue. For a moment, I allowed myself to believe they were retreating, that maybe, finally, they had nothing left to say. Then came the screenshot. It was from my cousin Sophie, one of the few in the family who still had the decency to check in with me privately. Her message said only, "Thought you should see this. I'm sorry." Attached was an image from the family group chat. My name bolded and followed by a bright red siren emoji, Ava police car light. Underneath it, a message from Lila, "Please be careful what you say around her. She's emotionally unstable and has been unpredictable lately. I'm genuinely worried." I stared at it for a full minute. Not because I was surprised, but because I wasn't. I didn't cry. I didn't respond. I forwarded it to Rachel with a note, "Additional documentation defamation." By lunchtime, I'd already buried the betrayal under task lists and calendar reminders. But that didn't mean it was gone. It sat in my chest like gravel, small, sharp, unmovable. Around 2, my phone lit up with an unfamiliar number. I hesitated, then answered, "Ava." The voice stopped me cold, "Ethan." I hadn't spoken to him in almost 3 years. The last time we saw each other, we were standing in a bookstore arguing over something small, but the silence that followed was huge and final. "I don't want to bother you," he said, voice lower. "But something's been eating at me. I think I owe you a conversation." He suggested a cafe near the university district. And 20 minutes later, I was parking in front of a little place with fogged windows and faded signage. Ethan looked older. Not in a bad way, just weathered. More real. We ordered coffees and sat near the back, away from the door. "I found out recently," he began, not making eye contact, "that Caleb borrowed money from me under the pretense of a short-term investment. Said you were involved, that you would back him." My stomach tightened. He kept going, "He never paid me back. And when I tried to confront him, Lila told me you'd used me, that you were in it for stability, said you had no real feelings for me, that I was just convenient." I didn't interrupt. He swallowed hard, and I believed her. "I didn't ask you. I just disappeared." The truth didn't hurt as much as the silence had. Not knowing, not being given the courtesy of being asked. "I wanted to say I'm sorry," he said, "for not coming to you directly, for not trusting you." I took a sip of my coffee and looked him in the eye. "You believed her because it was easier than believing me." He didn't argue. He just nodded, ashamed. When the check came, I reached for it before he could, paid in cash, left a tip. I stood, "Thank you for saying it. That matters. But I don't need you to fix it. Just don't be part of the lie anymore." He looked up at me, eyes soft, "I won't." Outside, the rain had stopped. I didn't offer a hug, didn't wait for him to ask to see me again. I walked back to my car, started the engine, and sat in the quiet. Back home, I opened the legal file again and added 2 more items, the group chat screenshot and a note summarizing Ethan's admission. Then I attached it to an email to Rachel with the subject line, "Updated evidence. Proceed as discussed." My fingers hovered over the keyboard before I opened one more app. Group text, Henry, Lila, and Caleb. I typed one sentence, "Your 10-day window is now 3. I didn't add punctuation. I didn't say Ava. They knew exactly who it was from. The message from Nora landed at 8:07 a.m., just as I was pouring milk into my tea. "They're packing. Nana's crying." I didn't pause. I didn't reread. I set the mug down carefully, wiped a spot on the counter that wasn't there, and replied, "That's between them and the lease. I didn't owe them comfort. Not anymore. And I certainly didn't owe them shelter." The air outside was crisp, almost too clean. I threw on my coat, grabbed the folder off the kitchen table, and stepped out into a morning that felt like resolution. The courthouse was already buzzing when I arrived. Lawyers with coffee and overstuffed briefcases, clerks in motion, paper shuffling like background music. I stood in line at the filing window, documents in hand, posture straight. The clerk glanced at the form, read my name, and smiled faintly. "Final filing?" "Yes," I said. "Everything's in there. Proof of lease violation, correspondence, declaration of owner's right." She scanned it all efficiently and stamped the envelope without another question. "We'll serve them within the day. You'll get a text confirmation." I nodded, offered a quiet thank you, and turned toward the exit. Just before the glass doors, I stopped. There was a long marble bench near the side wall, empty. I sat, let myself breathe. The last few months had taught me how often I used silence as a shield. How many things I hadn't said in the name of peace that only benefited everyone else. But this time, silence wasn't passive. It was decisive. Outside, traffic moved like nothing had shifted. But something had, in me, around me. Back at home, I placed the now filed copies of the eviction paperwork into the locked drawer of my desk. Everything had a place now, even endings. Around noon, Ethan texted a voice message. I hesitated, but pressed play. It was Lila. Her voice was sharp, unaware she was being recorded. I told him Ava was unstable, okay? I had to. She was getting too close. She asked too many questions. Ethan was nice, and we couldn't have her screwing up the balance. I needed him to walk away. Ethan's voice followed, "That's the truth, Ava. Don't act shocked. You know what kind of mess she brings." I replayed it twice, then sent it to Rachel with the subject line, "Audio confirmation of malice." She responded within 5 minutes, "This is solid. If they push back, this is leverage." I didn't cry. I didn't shake. I didn't even feel anger. Just a quiet sense of justice slipping into place. That afternoon, as I watered the plant near the window, one that had struggled through the cold and revived last spring, I got another message. It was from my mother, Ellen, a wall of text, long, dramatic, rambling about forgiveness, about faith, about how I shouldn't let pride erase family. She ended with, "If you can find it in your heart to forgive, you'll remember who you are." Not a single apology, not 1 ounce of accountability, just a plea for me to be the bigger person, the role I was cast in from birth. I typed one word, "No." Then turned my phone off. That evening, I went for a walk, looped around the block twice. The air was thick with late autumn. A neighbor smiled at me, and I smiled back. It was small, but real. When I returned home, a new text awaited, "Clerk, notice officially served at 4:43 p.m. I closed my phone and placed it face down. The sky darkened early this time of year, and I let it settle around the apartment like a blanket. No music, no TV, just stillness. Somewhere across the city, they were realizing what that envelope meant. That it wasn't a bluff, that they weren't above the law or my limits. They would have to leave. They would face, for the first time in years, a reality they didn't control. And I didn't have to witness it. That was the final win. 1 week later, I stood in my new kitchen, barefoot on cold tile, unpacking a box labeled Essentials. It was quiet, save for the distant sound of leaves rustling through the cracked open window. The rental was modest, 2 bedrooms, 1 bath, slightly uneven floors, but it was mine. No one had screamed in this space. No one had thrown anything. No one had told me I owed them my voice. Out front, lavender grew in imperfect bunches along the porch. The previous tenant had planted them, according to the landlord, but I liked to believe the ground knew I needed softness. I placed a ceramic teacup on the windowsill, the kind with a floral lip and a small crack near the handle. It wasn't the same as the one that had left a burn on my chest, but it had a history, and that felt honest. I brewed tea without checking my phone. The kettle whistled low, like it didn't want to disturb the peace. And just as I poured the water, I heard the ping of a new email. It was from Nora. Subject line, "For you." The message began with no greeting, just her voice, raw and brave in its simplicity. "Ava, I'm sorry for what they did. I see you now. I love you. Even if they never say it, I will." I read it twice. Then I cried. Not the stifled, breath-held sobs that made you curl into yourself, but open tears, quiet, full, cleansing. I didn't respond right away. I let the moment breathe. Let her words do what no apology from Henry or Lila ever could. That afternoon, I took a walk. Not far, just a loop around the neighborhood. The houses here were older, paint-chipped, mailboxes leaning slightly left or right. But there was a gentleness in the cracks. People waved. One man watered his lawn in slippers. Eventually, I found myself near the block where the old house stood, the one I grew up in, the one they had just left. It sat empty now, blinds tilted, grass higher than usual. A for sale sign had gone up on the front lawn. Not my sign, someone else's. A neighbor from across the street recognized me. She waved, "New folks moving in soon?" I smiled, "Looks like it." I didn't explain. Didn't offer a backstory. What was the point? Later, I sat in the living room with a blanket around my shoulders, watching the light shift across the floor. There was no furniture yet, just a folding chair and my laptop propped on a storage bin. I logged into my email again, not looking for anything specific, and stumbled across a message forwarded from Rachel. Subject, final status update. In it, she noted Henry and Lila had officially vacated. The sheriff's office had no issue, no resistance. Rumors had begun circulating. Lila's social media accounts were either deactivated or wiped clean. Caleb, according to a distant cousin, had packed up and left town without a word. Henry and Lila were renting a one-bedroom over a nail salon in Norwood, close to where Henry used to preach about people who didn't work for their living. There was no lawsuit, no confrontation, just disappearance. I didn't share the update. I didn't gloat. I didn't screen capture their downfall or post cryptic quotes online. Instead, I poured myself another cup of tea and walked into the second bedroom where I'd started hanging up drawings from Nora. One painting stood out, a small house, lavender in the yard, two stick figures holding hands out front, one tall, one small, a sun with too many rays beamed overhead. At the bottom, she'd scrawled a caption, "We don't live in fear anymore." I framed it, hung it near the door, and as I stepped back, taking in the crooked smile of the sun and the way she had drawn my hair too long, I felt something I hadn't felt in years. Not victory, not vindication, something gentler, like breathing room. Not everything broken can be rebuilt. But not everything needs to be. Sometimes walking away isn't weakness. It's clarity. Ava didn't burn bridges out of spite. She stepped out to save herself. Not all families offer protection. Some demand silence in exchange for belonging. So, what would you do if family kept crossing your boundaries? Let us know in the comments. Your story might help someone else find their voice. And if you found this story powerful, don't forget to subscribe for more real-life tales of resilience and redemption.